If a 10-year-old boy wearing duct-taped boots and an oversized hoodie stood right in front of the city's largest hospital and told you, "I can help your daughter walk again," how would you react? Would you laugh it off as some kind of childish joke, or would you stop in your tracks? Because maybe, just maybe, this was the last glimmer of hope you couldn't afford to ignore. That question wasn't just meant for a father in Cleveland, Ohio. It's meant for you too, the one watching this story, because what you're about to hear is not a novel, and it's not about a doctor with a shining degree. This is a journey that began with a poor boy, an old spiral notebook, and a promise to his late grandmother, one that would eventually move an entire community to tears. Picture a bleak winter morning in Cleveland. The wind off Lake Erie cut through the air, carrying a cold that bit down to the bone. Cars rushed past salt-covered streets, and people hurried along with their heads down, clutching hot coffee cups, as if that was the only thing keeping them upright. And in the middle of it all, right outside the revolving doors of Cleveland Clinic Children's Hospital, there sat a boy. He wasn't begging for money. He wasn't calling out to anyone. He just sat quietly with his old notebook, scribbling, observing. Most people walked past without even noticing. Everyone had their own burdens inside that hospital: doctor's appointments, test results, empty words of comfort. But then a gaunt-faced, middle-aged man stepped out of a Ford F-150, cradling his 7-year-old daughter in his arms. She was wrapped in a thick blanket, her legs lifeless since a school bus accident. This father had tried everything, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, only to be met with doctors shaking their heads. Be patient. Learn to accept it. And that was when the 10-year-old black boy looked up. His voice was calm, steady, and nothing like a joke. "Sir, I can help her walk again." In that moment, no one believed him. The father froze, glaring at the boy. Who would believe that a child in torn shoes and baggy clothes would dare to say what the most prestigious hospital could not? He brushed it off, walked straight inside, forcing himself to ignore those words. But you know how some words, once spoken, cling to your mind like a thorn. The more you try to push them away, the deeper they press. All that morning, through the bright, sterile hallways of the hospital, that father kept hearing the boy's voice echoing in his head. "I can help her walk again." It repeated with every heartbeat, dragging him into a brutal conflict. Every bit of logic, every ounce of life experience screamed this was childish nonsense. But the heart of a father whispered, if there's even a 1% chance, you have to try. Because maybe this time, it's different. And that's why the very next day, when the clock struck noon at Edgewater Park, that father showed up with his daughter, just to see if a boy in duct-taped boots, holding an old notebook and a secondhand gym bag, could really do the impossible. But remember, this story isn't just about a little girl learning to walk again. It's about a child's promise to his grandmother. It's about a community thought to be fading, suddenly coming alive again. And it's about trembling footsteps powerful enough to silence an entire city. Before we begin, I want to invite you into this journey. Hit subscribe so the next time a story like this is told, you'll be the first to hear it. Leave a heart in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Because even that small act helps stories of hope like this travel farther, to reach those who desperately need one more reason to believe again. A heavy gray winter morning settled over Cleveland. The sky hung like a slab of lead, thick and unmoving. Winds swept in straight off Lake Erie, slapping the faces of passers-by, carrying with them a damp chill and the faint brine of salt. The streets were streaked white with anti-ice grit, tires crunching and grinding over it. People hurried with their heads down, scarves wrapped tight, clutching steaming paper coffee cups, as if moving just a little faster might let them outrun the cold. Outside the revolving glass doors of Cleveland Clinic Children's Hospital, a man stepped out of a dusty gray Ford F-150. David Harris, in his early 40s, face hollowed, deep lines etched at the corners of his eyes. His heavy coat did little to mask the weight pressing down on his shoulders. Day after day, he drove here, carrying the same fragile hope that maybe today the doctors would have better news than yesterday. But for months, every appointment had come with the same phrases: be patient, no breakthrough, prepare for the long road. Words that gnawed steadily at his faith. David walked around to the back, opened the door, and lifted his daughter into his arms. Emily Harris, just 7 years old, hair cropped neatly short, her small frame wrapped in a thick wool blanket. Her legs had been lifeless since the school bus accident in the spring, an accident that had rewritten their lives. David held her close, careful with every step, as though any misstep might shatter her. Emily pressed her face into her father's shoulder, her wide blue eyes avoiding the sight of the hospital. David barely noticed the boy sitting quietly by the revolving doors. A flattened cardboard box served as his seat. His cracked boots were bound in silver duct tape, and an oversized hoodie draped loosely over his thin body. In his hands, an old spiral notebook with frayed edges, pages smudged with pencil marks like half-finished sketches. Malik Johnson, 10 years old, lifted his head. His dark eyes were deep, still, older than his years. David carried Emily past, not sparing a glance. But then Malik spoke, his voice clear, steady, without tremor, not the sound of a child blurting foolish words. "Sir, I can help her walk again." David froze. The words carried no trace of playfulness. They landed in his ears like a strange, unsettling touch, illogical, yet impossible to shake off. He whipped around, eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" His tone was sharp, suspicion hardening in his gaze. Malik rose, clutching the notebook to his chest, and repeated slowly, firmly, "I can help Emily walk again." David pulled his daughter tighter in his arms, his eyes cold. "Don't joke about that, kid. This isn't something to play with." "I'm not joking," Malik answered simply. His voice was even, his stare unblinking, as if each word was a truth already proven. David looked him over, the taped-up shoes, the oversized hoodie, the boyish face. Everything screamed poverty, weakness, and it was exactly that contrast that made his words sound absurd. He turned away and marched straight into the hospital. But in his mind, the boy's voice kept echoing, stubborn, immovable. "I can help her walk again." All morning, David sat in waiting rooms, listening to doctors present results, listening to hollow reassurances. He nodded absently, mind empty. Emily sat silently beside him, her legs unmoving under the blanket, and through the haze of sterile words, he kept hearing the boy's voice, steady, unwavering, like a declaration that refused to fade. By noon, David carried his daughter back to the truck. As he passed the doors again, his eyes searched almost against his will. Malik was still there, seated on the cardboard, notebook resting on his knees. He looked up straight into David's eyes, not pleading, not pushing, only as if he already knew David would have to turn back. David stopped for a beat, then growled, "Why did you say that? What do you know about my daughter?" Malik stood, pressing the notebook tight against his chest. "I don't need to know everything. I just need a chance. My grandmother Ruth taught me how to listen to the body. She said, the body remembers, even when hope forgets." David's glare sharpened. "You're 10 years old. You think a few made-up lines can replace real doctors?" Malik only shook his head slightly. "I'm not replacing anyone. I'm asking for 1 hour in the park. If nothing happens, you'll never have to see me again." David opened his mouth to shut him down, but Emily tugged at his sleeve. Her blue eyes flickered with a rare spark. She whispered so softly, "Daddy." He sounded like he really believed it. Maybe try." David froze. His heart clenched. How long had it been since his daughter had voiced any desire at all? Day after day, she had accepted the wheelchair as if it were part of her body. Yet here she was, looking at him, trembling, but burning with a fragile hope. In his head, reason shouted, "He's just a street kid. This is an illusion, a trick." But another voice whispered stubbornly, "If there's even 1 in a million chance, wouldn't it be worth it?" He swallowed hard, then sighed. His voice came slow, heavy. "If you're serious, meet me at Edgewater Park tomorrow at noon. 1 hour. If you're lying, don't ever show your face to me again." Malik didn't flinch. He only nodded. His eyes glowed, steady, as if he'd known all along the answer would come. David carried Emily into the truck and started the engine. In the rear-view mirror, he still saw the boy standing there, small against the thick gray of Cleveland's winter. But inside David something stirred. Not quite faith, not yet hope, but a pull, the fierce urge of a father willing to risk anything if it meant his daughter might one day stand again. Sunday at noon in Cleveland. The wind off Lake Erie swept through Edgewater Park. Patches of old snow clung to the grass. Dark wooden benches trembled in the gusts, and a few seagulls cried out hoarsely overhead. David pulled the gray Ford F-150 into the lot, eyes heavy with fatigue. Emily sat quietly, wrapped tight in a blanket, her small hands clutching the edge of the fabric. She tilted her head and asked softly, "Daddy, do you think he'll come?" David swallowed hard and muttered, "We're only here to see that nothing happens." But deep down, he knew he was lying to himself. And then he saw the boy. Malik Johnson was already waiting on an old wooden bench under the oak tree, a second-hand gym bag beside him. He wore the oversized hoodie, the duct-taped boots. What made David pause wasn't the ragged clothes. It was the way the boy carried himself. He didn't wave them over, didn't beg for attention. He just sat there, as if certain they would come. David lifted Emily out of the truck and wheeled her closer. Malik stood and bowed his head slightly. "Hello, sir." "Hello, Emily." Emily's eyes widened. "How do you know my name?" Malik answered calmly. "Yesterday, your father called you." I remembered. Such a simple line, but it made Emily smile faintly. David's chest ached at the sight. How long had it been since his daughter last smiled? He quickly masked it with a stern voice. "What's in that bag of yours?" "Looks like child's play." Malik opened it. Inside, a hot water bottle wrapped in cloth, a scuffed baseball, a jar of Vaseline, and a few strips of elastic bandage. "My grandmother used these to help veterans recover. She said the body doesn't always need machines. Sometimes all it needs is warmth, a ball, and patience." David let out a dry laugh. "The best hospital in the country couldn't fix this, and you think a 10-year-old boy can?" Malik didn't rush to answer. He looked David straight in the eye, his voice low and firm. "I promise nothing. I'm only asking for 1 hour. If nothing happens, you'll never have to see me again." Emily turned, her voice trembling. "Daddy, let me try." In that moment, David felt torn in half. On one side, reason screamed, "Don't be foolish. This is an illusion." On the other side, his daughter's eyes shining with a rare, fragile spark after months of despair. He feared hope, because hope always dragged disappointment behind it, but he feared even more the thought of seeing that light go out again. After a heavy silence, he sighed. "Fine, but only to try. The moment something's wrong, we stop." Malik nodded. He knelt by Emily, pressing the warm bottle against her still legs. "Is it too hot?" Emily shook her head, a small smile forming. "It's warm. Feels nice." He waited a few minutes, then gently rotated her ankle, stretching each joint. No force, no rush. As he worked, Malik kept her distracted with questions. "What's your favorite color?" "Ocean blue." "What did you like to do before?" "Drawing and playing baseball with friends." Malik placed the old baseball into her hand. "Hold it. Let your body remember what movement feels like." David stood with arms crossed, heart pounding. He wanted to believe, but fear gnawed at him. Every touch of Malik's hand seemed to ask a question of its own. Could it really be possible? Half an hour passed. Malik tapped lightly on Emily's knee. "Do you feel anything?" Emily closed her eyes, then suddenly opened them wide, voice shaking. "Yes, like a little tingle." David jolted, dropping to his knees. "Are you serious?" "It's true." "Daddy." Her small smile made his heart twist tight. David knew a tingle meant nothing certain, but it was the first time since the accident that his daughter had felt anything different. Hope, fragile, dangerous, was seeping back in, and he both feared it and longed to hold on to it. Malik packed up his things, speaking softly. "Today is only the beginning. Her body is listening now. Next week, same time, same place. We'll continue." David stayed silent, eyes fixed on his daughter. Emily clutched the baseball tight, her face glowing with the joy of something new. And for the first time in months, David didn't silence that quiet whisper inside. Maybe, just maybe this time is different. A week later, Cleveland lay under a blanket of gray, the sky heavy with clouds, the wind off Lake Erie cutting cold and sharp, but Edgewater Park still bore the imprint of their last meeting. Malik was already there, waiting on the same wooden bench beneath the old oak, a towel spread out on the grass. When David's Ford F-150 pulled into the lot, Emily whispered with a spark in her voice, "Daddy?" He came. David pressed his lips tight, trying to appear indifferent, though inside he knew he had been waiting too. Malik rose and bowed slightly. "Hello, sir. Hello, Emily." He had already set a hot water bottle and the worn baseball on the towel. David carried his daughter down, placed her in the familiar spot, then folded his arms, watching every movement closely. This time, Malik wasted no time. He wrapped the warm bottle around Emily's calves, waited until her body loosened, then placed the baseball under her foot, gently rolling it back and forth. "Try pressing down a little." Emily bit her lip, pushed, but nothing happened. Malik nodded calmly. "It's fine. Let your brain get used to the signal first." David sighed, but minutes later, Emily suddenly exclaimed, "Daddy." I felt a little sting in my toes. David bent down sharply. "Are you sure?" Emily nodded hard, her eyes shining. David went still, heart hammering in his chest. Just a small sensation, but to him, it was proof of life returning. Malik smiled. "Good. Your body is beginning to remember." After that session, David noticed Emily was different. She counted the days until Sunday. Smiles, little stories began to return at the dinner table. Watching her, David realized maybe what mattered wasn't only the result, but that Emily was living inside hope again. By the third week, Malik brought a few elastic bands. He wrapped them around her ankles and instructed, "Push out, I'll hold back just a little." Emily bit her lip, sweat breaking on her forehead, and then all three of them saw her foot shift the smallest bit. David's hands shook as he laid them on her shoulder. "You did it!" Emily burst out laughing, the sound so pure it nearly brought him to tears. He couldn't help himself. "Who taught you this?" Malik paused, eyes shadowed with sadness. "My grandmother, Ruth. She was a rehab nurse at a veterans home. When I was little, I followed her there every day. She taught me hot water, baseball, and massage. She said, 'The human body remembers longer than we think. Your job is only to remind it.'" Malik hesitated, then spoke more softly. "She died of COVID. Before she closed her eyes, she held my hand and told me, 'Don't let your hands stop touching others. That's how they'll know they're still alive.'" Silence fell. David's throat tightened. He looked at the duct-taped boots, the worn gym bag, the boy's eyes, steadfast yet fragile, and in that instant he understood. Malik wasn't just healing Emily. He was keeping a final promise to his grandmother. In the weeks that followed, David began to take part. He no longer just stood and watched. Malik handed him the bands, showed him how to lift Emily's leg, how to press gently behind the knee to wake the nerves. At first, David was clumsy, awkward, and pressed too hard. Malik corrected him softly. "No, sir. Like this. Gentle, don't force." And David, a 45-year-old man, found himself learning from a 10-year-old boy. But he felt no shame, only gratitude. One day, as Emily struggled to rotate her foot, sweat beading on her brow, David's mind flashed back to the hospital visits. The doctor's words had always been the same. Slow recovery. Don't expect too much. Yet here, with nothing more than a hot water bottle and an old baseball, Emily was doing what dozens of appointments had never delivered. A question welled up in him. Could belief itself be part of medicine? But not every week was a triumph. In the 5th week, Emily broke down in tears. "I keep trying and nothing's changing," she cried. Shoving the baseball away in anger, David froze, his chest aching. Malik stepped forward, crouching to her eye level. "I cried too, when my grandmother's hands could no longer help anyone. But I learned, if we stop, the memory in the body stops too. If you want to quit, I won't blame you. But if you keep going, I'll be here with you." Emily looked at him, tears streaming down, then nodded faintly. The whole park was silent. David squeezed his daughter's hand, whispering, "I won't give up either." That day, Emily made no new progress. But on the way home, she said softly, "I feel stronger, not in my legs, in here." She pressed a hand to her chest. David gripped the steering wheel, vision blurring with tears. He knew that was the real miracle. Week by week, every small movement, every smile, every bead of sweat became a victory. And in David's home, for the first time since the accident, the gloom began to lift, making room for laughter, for life. That Sunday, Cleveland was colder than usual. The wind off Lake Erie howled through the park, scattering the last of the dead leaves. Edgewater stood nearly deserted, only a few figures hurrying past. David pulled the Ford F-150 into the lot, quieter than usual. In the rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of Emily turning her face away, her eyes swollen from lack of sleep. When the truck stopped, Emily said nothing. No excited smile like the weeks before. She sat wrapped in her blanket, small fists clenched tight. David lifted her out, felt how light her body was, and yet how heavy in a different way. He pushed the wheelchair to the old oak, where Malik had already laid out a towel and set down the hot water bottle. "Hello, Emily." Malik's smile was calm as always, but Emily didn't answer. She stared down at the ground, her eyes dark. David fumbled awkwardly. "She's just a little tired." Malik knelt and gently placed the warm bottle on her legs. But this time, there was no spark of delight. He tried rotating her ankle, tried to start a conversation. "Do you still like drawing?" Emily shook her head. "Last week, you said you wanted to play baseball again." She bit her lip, then burst out, "It's useless. I've tried all week. Nothing changes. I'll never walk again." Her small voice tore the silence wide open. David froze, heart clenched tight. He bent down, tried to hold her. "Emily, don't." But she shoved him away, crying out, "You don't understand. Every day it's trying, hoping, and then disappointment. I hate hoping." David was stunned. For months he had hidden that very same pain, and now his daughter had spoken it aloud. Malik stayed kneeling, his small hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed on Emily. His voice came soft, trembling, yet steady. "I used to hate hope too. Hate it because every time I hoped, it hurt worse. When my grandmother died of COVID, I sat in that little room with this bag and cried for hours. I thought, if she's gone, who can I help now? But then I remembered her words. If your hands stop touching others, they'll forget they're still alive." Emily lifted her head, tears streaming. Malik moved closer, voice lower, deeper. "You have the right to be angry, the right to cry. I cried too. But if you stop here, your body will stop listening. I don't want to see you quit, because I know you're stronger than you think." David looked at the two children facing each other. On one side, his daughter, fragile and despairing. On the other hand, a 10-year-old boy in duct-taped boots, voice trembling but eyes burning with determination. And suddenly, David felt small, 45 years old, yet all this time he had been hiding. While these two children faced their fear head on, Emily whispered, "But I'm scared." Malik nodded. "I'm scared too. Scared you won't come next time. Scared I'm not good enough. But being scared doesn't mean you stop. It just means you're standing in front of something important." A long silence stretched out. The waves on the lake pounded the shore like drums. David knelt beside his daughter, wrapping her in his arms. "Emily, I'm scared too. Scared of losing you. Scared you'll give up. But if you want to keep trying, I will never leave you." The little girl sobbed, then gave a small nod. Malik handed her the baseball. "All you have to do is roll it a little, nothing more." Emily's hand trembled as she set it down. There was no clear movement, just the faintest shift. But instead of crying out in frustration, she whispered, "I feel a little pressure." David pulled her close, eyes blurring. He didn't know if it was real or just her imagination, but he knew this moment mattered because Emily had chosen to continue. The session ended in silence. On the drive home, Emily rested her head against her father's shoulder and whispered, barely louder than a breath, "I won't give up. But Daddy, if one day I can't do it anymore, you'll still be here, right?" David choked back tears, kissed her golden hair. "I'm here, no matter what." As the truck rolled out of the park, Malik remained under the oak, notebook resting on his lap. He scribbled a few lines in his shaky handwriting, then lifted his gaze to the windswept lake. He knew the road ahead was long, and that today's tears were only part of the journey. But deep in his heart, Malik believed it is the stumbles, the falls, that lay the stepping stones to miracles. A week later, the sky over Cleveland was heavy and gray, but held back its rain. The wind off Lake Erie whipped through Edgewater Park, rattling the oak branches violently. David drove into the lot as usual, but his heart wasn't steady. He didn't know how Emily would respond after last week's outburst. Would she even agree to come? Would Malik still hold on to his faith? When the Ford F-150 stopped, David turned to look. Emily sat still, eyes fixed out the window. What froze him wasn't anger on her face anymore, but a quiet calm. "Are you sure you want to get out?" he asked softly. Emily nodded, whispering, "Daddy, I want to try again." Edgewater Park was nearly empty, just as always. Malik was already waiting on the old bench, the second-hand gym bag at his side. When he saw them, he stood, tugged his oversized hoodie tight against the wind, his duct-tape boots thudding softly against the ground. "Hello, Emily," Malik said with that same patient warmth. Emily answered quietly, "Hello, Malik." He caught the small spark in her eyes, and it warmed him from the inside. David wheeled her closer, arms folded, his voice still edged with doubt. "All right, so what are you planning that's different today?" Malik didn't answer right away. He opened the bag, pulling out the hot water bottle, the scuffed baseball, and a neatly folded towel. "Not much different," he said. "Just one step further." Emily lay on the towel, the hot water bottle resting on her thighs. Malik gently massaged her knees, rotated her ankles. His voice stayed steady, low. "Just breathe, slow and easy. We're not in a hurry." His calm was so steady that even David found his own breathing slowing to match. 15 minutes passed, only the sound of waves and wind. David shifted, about to speak, when Malik suddenly tapped lightly on Emily's knee. "Do you feel that?" Emily frowned. "Yes. Like ants crawling." David stiffened, heart racing, but reason leapt in. It could just be nerves reacting to heat or muscle loosening. He shook his head, yet when he saw Emily's faint, genuine smile, so rare, he stayed silent. Malik continued, "Good, Emily. Now try pushing the ball with your heel." Emily shut her eyes, focused with all her strength. At first, nothing. Then the ball rolled, just a few centimeters, but enough to shatter the air around them. David's eyes flew wide. You actually did it," Emily gasped, cheeks flushed. "Daddy, I felt it. I pushed it." Tears welled up, not of despair this time, but of belief returning. Malik sat frozen a moment, then broke into a rare, broad smile. "I told you, the body hasn't forgotten. It just needed reminding." David knelt down, his trembling hand resting on the ball. "Emily, you just did it." He turned to Malik, eyes flooded with shock, with hope, with gratitude. How did you?" Malik shook his head. "I didn't. She did. I only helped her believe in her own body." In that moment, David felt something give way inside. The walls of doubt he'd built over endless months cracked and crumbled. He remembered the doctor's words, the long appointments, the bills. All of them are saying only, "Wait." But here, on a patch of cold grass, his daughter had just achieved what no one dared promise. Emily burst out laughing, bright and clear as sunlight. "Daddy, I did it." David hugged her tight, tears dripping into her short, golden hair. "I believe you. This time, I really believe." Malik packed his things and placed the baseball into Emily's lap. "Keep it, to remind you. Your body still remembers." She held it close, eyes glowing. On the drive home, David kept glancing into the rear view. Emily was exhausted, but clutching the ball. Lips curved in a faint smile, even as her eyelids drooped shut. David swallowed hard. He whispered to himself, "Maybe, just maybe, this is only the beginning." Back at home, with Emily asleep, David sat alone in the living room, a bottle of whiskey on the table. But instead of pouring, he opened his laptop and typed, "Malik Johnson, Cleveland." Nothing appeared except a handful of old clippings about a retired nurse named Ruth Johnson, who had died of COVID. He froze. "Grandmother, promise." The words echoed in his mind. "If your hands stop touching others, they'll forget they're still alive." David leaned back, eyes closed, breathing deep. For the first time in months, the weight on his chest lifted. In its place came something far more fragile, far more dangerous: hope. Just 2 weeks after that baseball first rolled across the grass at Edgewater, everything had changed. Not on hospital charts or in medical reports, but in the way Emily laughed, in the way David looked at his daughter, in the way a forgotten park began to feel alive again. One Saturday morning, when David and Emily arrived at Edgewater, a mother and her son were already waiting. She introduced herself as Linda. Her boy was round-faced, about Emily's age, leaning on a walker. Linda's voice trembled as she said, "I heard from a nurse at Cleveland Clinic about a boy who helped your daughter move again. Could Malik maybe try to help my son too?" David hesitated. He wasn't ready to share Malik with anyone else, but Emily lit up. "Daddy, let Malik help him too." David glanced at Malik, who only gave a small nod. Yes, but after Emily. That session stretched twice as long. Malik still gave Emily her usual time, then sat with the new boy. He didn't do anything complicated, just a hot water bottle, gentle joint rotations, quiet conversation. But what struck David most was the look in those parents' eyes. They weren't staring at Malik as a child anymore, but as a small beacon in the dark. News spread fast. A week later, 3 families came to Edgewater. 2 weeks later, the number grew to 7. They didn't bring heavy expectations, only something rare. The belief that if Emily could smile again, their children deserved the chance to try too. No one called it a class. There were no sign-up sheets. Yet Sundays at Edgewater began to look like a community. A nearby diner sometimes brought a thermos of hot cocoa, leaving it on the stone bench for everyone. A pastor from a local church carried folding chairs, arranging them in a circle around the oak. Someone even printed simple flyers. Free movement sessions, Sundays at noon, Edgewater Park. David stood at the edge, watching the transformation. Children practiced small movements with makeshift tools. Hot water bottles, baseballs, and elastic bands bought at corner stores. Parents, so used to doctors' detached nods, now held hands, encouraged their kids. And, above all, there was Malik. The 10-year-old in duct-taped boots never perched above them. He always knelt down at the children's level. He never commanded. He asked, "How does it feel? Does it hurt? If you want to stop, we stop." And the children, usually silent in clinics, began to talk more, laugh more. One evening, as David drove Malik home, he asked, "How do you do it? Why do these kids trust you so much?" Malik was quiet for a moment, then said, "Because I once needed someone to believe in me. My grandmother used to say, 'Every time you touch a body, remind them they haven't given up.'" David went still. He had once thought Malik was only a stubborn kid, but now he understood. This boy was carrying the legacy of the generation before. Grandma Ruth, a nurse who had devoted her life to veterans. That promise had become a strength no textbook could ever teach. The Edgewater Circle grew, catching the attention of outsiders. A local blog reporter happened to pass by, astonished to see more than a dozen families gathered around a boy. No doctors in sight, only small hands guiding simple motions. The article ran under the headline, "The 10-year-old Boy and the Miracles by the Lake." The next day, a nurse at Cleveland Clinic asked David, "Is it true Emily stood up for a few seconds? People are saying so." David only smiled. She's learning to believe in her body again. But for Emily, the most important thing wasn't how long she could stand. It was that she wasn't alone anymore. In that circle at Edgewater, she found new friends, laughed, and struggled alongside them. At night, she told her father, "I like seeing Malik help the others. It's like, we're a team." David hugged her. Feeling his heart lighten, he realized this journey was no longer just their family's story. It had become a small flame, passing from one child to another, from one household to an entire community. And in the cold, gray heart of Cleveland, a group of ordinary people were learning once again how to believe in the extraordinary, thanks to a 10-year-old boy in duct-taped boots, quietly spreading his towel on the grass at Edgewater every Sunday. One Sunday, the wind off Lake Erie blew harder than usual, swirling the last golden leaves across the grass at Edgewater. Malik spread out his old towel, set down the second-hand gym bag, just like every other week. Emily beamed, ready for practice. But this time, something unusual happened. A group of people in long coats approached, name badges gleaming. At the front walked a middle-aged woman, hair tied neatly back, her stride quick and firm. She extended her hand. "Malik Johnson, I'm Dr. Eleanor Winters from the Callaway Institute in New York. We've heard quite a lot about you." Malik stepped back slightly, eyes flicking toward David. Harris narrowed his brow. Years of business had taught him to recognize the stance of someone offering an opportunity with strings attached. Winters smiled, cool and professional. "We're impressed. A 10-year-old boy is achieving results even top specialists rarely see. Callaway would like to give you a special opportunity, a full scholarship, advanced training, state-of-the-art labs, and a team of doctors guiding you every step. You'd be recognized as a medical prodigy. Parents around them whispered, eyes wide. Some gasped in admiration. Emily looked up at Malik anxiously. Are you going away? Malik said nothing. He just turned his old notebook in his hands. Head lowered. David stepped forward, his voice calm but taut. He's only 10. You're talking to Malik like he's some rare commodity. Winters smiled smoothly. Mr. Harris, I understand your concern, but you want your daughter to recover, don't you? In Calloway's environment, Malik could help not just Emily, but hundreds, thousands of children. A heavy silence fell. Emily gripped Malik's hand tightly. Don't go. Malik lifted his eyes, looked at her, then around at the other children, at the parents holding their fragile hopes. He swallowed, then said softly, his voice trembling but firm, Thank you, but I can't. The air seemed to shatter. Winter's brows furrowed. Do you realize what you're turning down? This is the kind of chance people dream of. Malik answered slowly, each word deliberate. My grandmother, Ruth, taught me that healing is not for money or for being called a genius. She said, every time you place your hands on someone, remember, they are a person, not a case file. I promised her, and I will not break that promise. A murmur rippled through the circle. Some parents wiped tears from their eyes. David stood frozen, struck as if he himself had just been given a lesson. Winter's tone hardened. Think carefully. We'll leave our contact. She handed him a card. Malik accepted it, but didn't keep it. He tucked it into his notebook and quietly closed it, as though burying the temptation itself. As the Calloway group walked away, Emily turned to her father. Daddy, why do people keep trying to make Malik theirs? David stroked her hair, voice low. Because this world always wants to own what it didn't create. But see, Malik chose to keep his promise, no matter how great the temptation. That evening, in the Harris kitchen, David poured himself a cup of coffee while Malik sat sketching idly in his notebook. Watching the boy, David felt a surge of respect. He remembered the times business partners had offered him lucrative deals, if only he would compromise his principles, and he had taken them. But this 10-year-old had just turned down gold to keep a promise. David said slowly, Malik, you know, if your father were alive, he'd be so proud of you, and me. I see now I have a lot to learn from you. Malik looked up, his dark eyes bright in the warm glow of the lamp. He gave only a small smile. I'm just doing what Grandma told me. And in David's heart, a truth rang clear. This story was no longer about saving his daughter. It had become a mirror, reflecting back on him. A once proud businessman who thought everything had a price, now learning from a boy in duct-taped boots that some things cannot be bought and must never be sold. That Sunday, Cleveland's sky was bright for once. The weak winter sun spilled across Lake Erie, casting silver streaks on the water. Edgewater Park was no longer just an empty patch of grass. More than 20 families had gathered early, bringing folding chairs, thick blankets, and thermoses of hot cocoa. Children's laughter rose up, mixing with the sound of waves. The air felt less like a therapy session and more like a festival. David wheeled Emily into the center of the circle. His heart pounded, not just with nerves for his daughter, but with awe. From a random encounter outside the Cleveland Clinic, it had grown into a community. He bent low and whispered, Are you ready, Emily? She nodded, her blue eyes lit with resolve. Malik stepped forward, hood shading most of his small face. In his hands, the same old towel, the hot water bottle, the worn baseball. Nothing glamorous, just ordinary objects. But his gaze, steady, calm, unshakable, brought silence over the crowd. Just like always, Malik said softly, his voice carrying clearly, This isn't magic. It's only her and her own body. He set the hot water bottle on Emily's thighs, massaged gently, then guided her. Now, we'll try standing. I'll hold her knees. Mr. Harris, hold her arms. The rest is Emily's. The crowd held its breath. David slid his arms under his daughter's shoulders, and Malik knelt in front, both hands steady on her knees. Emily closed her eyes. The world hushed, leaving only the wind. Count with me, Malik whispered. 1, 2, 3. David lifted slightly, and Malik braced her legs. Emily trembled, her small frame tensing. Legs that had been silent for months stiffened. Then Slowly, like a seed breaking through earth, they pressed down, shaking, faltering, but standing. The crowd froze. No cheers yet, only wide eyes and hands clapped to mouths. Emily opened her eyes, cheeks flushed. I'm standing. David's throat closed. He loosened his grip, leaving only Malik's hands resting lightly on her knees. For a breathless moment, Emily stood on her own. Her legs wobbled, but they held. Then the crowd erupted, applause, sobs, cries of "Oh my God," echoing through the park. Emily laughed through her tears. She tried to move her right foot. It shifted, slow but unmistakable. One step, then the left. 2 steps. The circle nearly exploded with joy. Malik drew back, eyes glistening but lips curved in a smile. "I told you, the body still remembers." David collapsed to his knees, catching Emily as she stumbled into his arms. He sobbed, voice breaking. "You did it, Emily. You really did it." Emily wrapped her arms around his neck, laughing through tears. "Daddy, I walked 3 steps." Other children wept too, some shouting, "I want to do that." Malik turned, scanning every face, and nodded. He knew today wasn't just for Emily. It was for all of them. A mother rushed forward, clasping David's hand. "Mr. Harris, thank you for believing in this boy. Because of Emily, we dared to hope." David only shook his head, his eyes fixed on Malik. He knew the truth. He hadn't made this happen. A 10-year-old in duct-taped boots had rekindled a flame adults had forgotten. By late afternoon, the sun sank behind the lake, but no one hurried home. They lingered, sharing stories, embracing, laughter breaking through tears. Malik sat quietly on the old wooden bench, notebook on his lap, simply watching. The crowd no longer needed his direction. They had made Edgewater into a place of hope themselves. David walked over, sat beside him, and set a hand on his shoulder. His voice was hoarse. "Malik, do you realize, today, my daughter took 3 steps, but what I can't believe is that you're only 10. Malik lifted his gaze, calm and clear. "I don't count years. I only count the times someone dares to try again." David swallowed hard. He knew this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something larger, not just for Emily, but for the whole Cleveland community. And he wondered, if a boy in old taped-up boots could do this, what might grown men like him accomplish? If only they dared to believe again. That night, after Emily had brought an entire community to tears with 3 trembling steps, David drove the Ford F-150 back home. In the rearview mirror, he saw Emily clutching the baseball, eyes half closed, a smile still curved on her lips. Beside her sat Malik, his worn boots pressed together, his arms wrapped protectively around his old spiral notebook, as if it were a treasure. David pulled up in front of the suburban house shaded by trees. He opened the door, turned to Malik. "Listen, you don't need to wander off after every session anymore. You've got a place now. If you want, stay here, with us." Malik froze. He looked at Emily, dozing in her blanket, then back at David. His voice was small, cautious. "Are you sure? Someone like me. Won't the neighbors talk?" David let out a rough chuckle. "If they do, they'll have to talk to me first. Malik, you gave my daughter something that millions of dollars at the hospital couldn't. Don't think for a second you're not worthy." The next morning, Emily wheeled herself down the hallway, hair tousled, shouting, "Malik, wake up! We're training today." The guest room now had clean sheets, a small desk, and a shelf for the notebook. Malik sat on the edge of the bed, dazed. For the first time in months, he had a place he could call home. In the days that followed, the Harris house filled with sounds no one had heard in a long time. Children's laughter, a baseball rolling across the wooden floor, Emily counting out reps in Malik's steady rhythm. At dinner, David watched them laughing together, and something warm returned to him. The shadows of failure, the heavy hospital days, began to lift. One evening, as David washed dishes, he glanced at Malik sketching at the kitchen table. "Ever think about going back to school? You're smart, talented. You could go far." Malik looked up, hesitated. "I don't want to stop what Grandma started. She used to say, 'Let your hands remind others they're still alive.' I want to keep that path." David was quiet, then nodded. "Then we'll find a way for you to do both. Learn to go far, but never lose your roots." Emily, listening nearby, eyes shining, tugged Malik onto the balcony after dinner. The cold wind off Lake Erie stung their cheeks. She whispered, "Malik, when can I walk? I want to help other kids too. Will you teach me?" Malik blinked, then smiled. "Of course. You'll be the next one. We'll never let anyone forget their body still remembers." In that moment, a small seed sprouted. This wasn't just about Emily's recovery. It was the start of something passed forward. The following weekend, when the community gathered at Edgewater again, they didn't just see Emily training. They watched her carefully mirror Malik's moves, placing a hot water bottle on another child's legs, encouraging softly, "It's okay, just try again." Malik stood behind her, watching, pride glowing quietly in his eyes. David's chest swelled at the sight. He knew their story had grown beyond his family's pain. It had become a current flowing forward, from Grandma Ruth to Malik, from Malik to Emily, and from Emily outward to many more. That night, David wrote a few lines in his journal, the first since his wife had passed. "Today, I saw my daughter not just learning to walk. I saw her learning to give. And maybe that is even more important than the first steps." Winter in Cleveland slowly gave way to the chill of early spring. The snow had melted, leaving puddles scattered along the sidewalks, while Edgewater Park was now covered in a tender green of fresh growth. One afternoon, the community gathered again beneath the old familiar oak. No longer strangers or curious onlookers, but a circle of familiar faces. People who had once arrived here with eyes full of despair, now smiling as they watched their children make progress. Emily stood in the center, her small legs trembling, but her face radiant with pride. Malik placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, then stepped back. David stood behind, arms ready, eyes brimming. 1, 2, 3. Emily took her steps, slow but deliberate, before falling into her father's arms. But this time she didn't cry. She laughed, loud and free, as if she wanted the entire park to hear. Applause erupted, mixing with the calls of seagulls and the rhythm of Lake Erie's waves. Other parents clutched their children, as if infused with new strength. One mother whispered, "If Emily can do it, so can my child." David bent down, holding his daughter tight, then looked up at Malik. His eyes spoke more than 1,000 thank yous. Malik only gave a quiet smile. Gripping his old spiral notebook, he knew that somewhere, Grandma Ruth was smiling too. That night, in the Harris family's small house, David poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat silently by the window. He remembered the dark days in the hospital, the endless appointments, the empty reassurances from doctors. He had once believed miracles lived only in books, and yet now, a boy in duct-taped boots had made him, and an entire community, believe again. He wrote a line in his old leather journal. "In America, we worship degrees, research institutes, glass towers gleaming with light. But sometimes, salvation comes from a 10-year-old boy with a tattered spiral notebook and a promise to his grandmother. Sometimes the most important thing isn't technique, but who is patient enough to believe, to wait, and to remind the body that it never truly forgets." Malik walked into the kitchen, voice low. "Mr. David, can I make Emily my assistant?" David looked up, surprised. "Assistant?" Malik nodded, serious. "She has good hands, and she knows what it feels like to lose hope. That matters." David turned to Emily, sitting at the table, carefully wrapping a warm towel around a hot water bottle, practicing exactly as Malik had once done. He smiled softly. "If that's my daughter's dream, I won't stand in her way." Their story was no longer just Cleveland's. A local blogger's account of the afternoon Emily stood had been shared thousands of times. A short phone video spread across social media, drawing people from far away to Edgewater. But Malik never changed his way. He simply spread the towel, opened his bag, and began each session as if the outside world had nothing to do with it. And there, the first steps, the small finger movements, the tears that turned into laughter, all continued to unfold. Not loud, not glamorous, just people learning once again to believe in their own bodies. This story leaves a question hanging for anyone who hears it. If a boy in broken boots can awaken what has slept inside the body, how many other miracles might be waiting quietly around us? If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. And if you know a Malik out there, or an Emily, tell them these words: "You matter. You are needed."